Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Nichelle Anderson. I'm your host for my podcast show, Nichelle Anderson Short Stories and Beyond. Thank you so much for tuning in for this particular week, which would be that I would turn back and focusing on MOLIAE. This particular week episode, I'm focusing on character profile. So it would be this week as well as next week. I will continue on with another character profile, and then I would, return back to what I have planned, rolling out the rest of these weeks for my season 2 of my show. So this particular week we'll be focusing on King Daniy'el. So thank you so much for tuning in. Let me just go over a couple of things here before I start my usually opening, and that is this is a premium podcast where I release mostly clip snippets, and with those you can become a patron member. If you want to know more about that link to my Patreon page is in the description page there, that you can check that out. And this right here, my podcast is mostly focused on MOLIAE, that stands for Moments of Love in Ancient Egypt. It is a theatrical production based on my book that I wrote, which is Mitsrayim. Right now that production is currently in the prep phase, gearing up to return back to stage. It's entitled The Prestige Return of MOLIAE Stage Play. So again, I like to continue to say that because I know some people have been waiting for when I announce that, and I like to continue to do it. I'm still on the game. I'm still working on it to get to that point to announce those dates that hopefully you can come out and support the production, support MOLIAE. All right, and also with this particular podcast, I do have an app. Some of my other apps, I am working on them. I'm revamping them. For the most part, for this one, I do have an app. You can get that on Google Play or in the App Store. This podcast, Nichelle Anderson, Short Stories and Beyond. Go ahead and check that out. So King Daniy'el, just to kind of right quick, he's featured in my podcast. He's the first one out of the main kings from my book that has been featured in the podcast. I did that last year in December when I roll out those quick rollouts of a short story series for December. And King Daniy'el, he went from the book and he went to the stage play, the short stage plays that I did. It was like episode 1, episode 2 that I did. I broke that up, and he was in the webisodes and short film. So King Daniy'el is very important. He's important in regards to Princess Aamina. There would be a love interest there. And at this time in the podcast, Princess Aamina is not born yet, along with King Kohane, he is one of the rivals to King Daniy'el, the main rival, I should say, his younger brother. And King Kohane, as of yet, is not on the scene in this particular podcast. Okay, so with all that done and said, I want to go ahead and move forward and talk about the highlight that was the highlight overall for this week. Is basically focusing on King Daniy'el as a central important character. Like I said, he was introduced last month in December when he was with King Kohane. King Kohane was mentioned in my book, Mitsrayim, because that's who set the deal for Princess Aamina to marry King Kohane. Now, we didn't know the backstory of that when you read the book. Heck, I didn't really know the backstory when that scene came to me as a vision to write it. Now, fast forward, I'm getting all the goodies. And you're learning about the past that led to that deal from the book perspective. You're learning or getting a good idea of what's going on, or what went on, I should say, back then. Okay, so that's basically on that. And nevertheless, you should know that King Daniy'el will be in the return of the stage play, which is no longer be the short, episode stage plays that I did, or the webisodes that I did, or the short film. In a sense, it's going to bring more characters, and he's going to be definitely in the gist of it. Okay, he's going to be all in it. So he will be in that play, in the prestige return of that. So just to recap from the last episode that we did last week, And that was episode 46. Hani enters the domain of Tamat. You got to check that out. Now that is a clip snippet. And again, with this podcast, to get the full short story, you become a patron member. And there's different levels there. Just check it out at Patreon if you're interested to get the full short story. I will make an announcement soon about this podcast I'm doing. And I'm doing another podcast on a different topic, which I give a shout out to that. I try not to combine most of the time, but the other podcast I'm doing is called Surviving Your Journey to Success. So I will be making an announcement on that one too, of where I want to take both of my podcasts going forward after season 2. So just look out for that announcement. It might be pretty much probably part of my episode or a bonus that I just drop something and let you know this is what's going to come to fruition. But at any rate, that was last week. You got to check it out. That's when we're focusing on Hani. He is one of the senior cancer members of the military regime in the Orion skies, and I highlight how he is on the scene now. He is on Tamat. Tamat is another name from Earth that we call it now. And after a notice to the expansion of Nantu rebellion and the whereabouts of his dear friend, and that's talking about Echo. So go ahead and check that episode out. Next week, my other character profile will be focusing on Hani. Why do I feel that I need to highlight this character and give him a profile? Because if I'm doing that, that's a good clue for you that they're very important to the overall story, that they have a lot of legs in it or a lot of investment into the story. You will hear about them again. They will be some way a part of the story that it repeats itself or some new angle is connected to them. So when I do a character profile, I'm highlighting that this particular person you need to pay attention about and know about. It puts more puzzles to this overall universe of MOLIAE. All right. And if you like my podcast, I guess Spreaker makes you become a member. It is free. If you've been following me for a while and you really like my short stories, which I hope that you do, and I do see people returning back, just, log on to say, hey, give me a high five, girl. I love your stories. Give me a shout out. I really appreciate you are recommending. I know you have to be telling somebody because I do see my stats, and that's what the impression that I get. But just, also consider just, if you don't want to become a patron that way, okay, just, post something. Link it back to one of your social page. You really got to check out this podcast, Leave a comment to say that you like it. If you have a question about the characters and you want to find more information about it, just leave a comment and ask, connect with me. I will connect with you. You might connect with others. If you want to know more and want to episode more about a previous character that I haven't focused on a while, usually it's a reason for that. But if you want to know that, that's a way that you can comment and ask a question. So it's a way that you can comment, I believe, here. If not, you could do it on the Facebook page, MOLIAE. Okay, so let's get started, right, with this particular episode. Let's begin. For this week of my Season 2 podcast show, Nichelle Anderson, Short Stories and Beyond, for this week episode featuring character profile on King Daniy'el. Let me go ahead and start. The King Daniy'el was one of the main characters' roles in the storyline of my book, Mitsrayim. He is the love interest of Princess Aamina from that timeline that was focused on the first series of stage plays and webisodes, as well as the short film of King Daniy'el in the midst of things, like I said earlier, right? He's all in the middle of it. So in the timeline of my book and theatrical productions prior to the podcast, King Daniy'el is in his early 20s. So when we do the Prestige Return of the stage play, you will see him in his early 20s, what have you. And he's more experienced in rulership because he's the first one on the scene. And in the sense regarding Princess Aamina, King Daniy'el, when they finally be born and get on the scene as well. So you find out all of this during the podcast series timeline. He's a young boy. He's with King Kohane. King Kohane was the one that made the initial deal with King Milan. Now you notice now in the podcast series, you get more understanding of King Kohane was an actual good friend of King Milan, because you already saw a previous episode, not just in December, but last month, where King Cohan is with King Milan of Mitsrayim. King Milan is the father of Princess Aamina, not born yet, and Princess Hannah. She's on the scene now in the podcast series. So with King Daniy'el, just to say, he's the younger brother of King Daniy'el that we're focusing on today. He is the arch agitator to Princess Aamina and all the others in Mitsrayim, which is MOLIAE, right? MOLIAE. And King Daniy'el is the ruler of Kodesh. That's the area where we would consider the initial whereabouts to where Sumner was located. He has traveled in many regions. He has a lot of resources and knowledge. He is more of an adventurous type person and astute to the student of the occurrence. Now, I mentioned occurrence in my book. I mentioned in the podcast, as well as in my theatrical productions that I produce up to now. And the occurrence is more of a hierarchy, spiritual type realm of authority and of knowledge. So those randomness of theology of Amtun, King Daniy'el is an astute student. He understands it, he follows it, he lives by it. You have challenges in life, but he comes back to that to keep him grounded. He has a close friend in Egypt. His name is Abiah too. And Abiah II. You will see Abiah in my book, Mitsrayim, and he was in the webisodes. He was not in the short stage plays that I did. He will return back because he's one of the person that kind of connects and introduce them formally in a way now since they're older, Princess Aamina and King Daniy'el in the future. So yeah, you will hear more about Abiah II later. Now in the podcast series timeline, he's a young boy learning the strategies of kings and rulers. At this time, his younger brother and rival King Daniy'el again is not born yet, but you do get to see how King Daniy'el makes decisions. You do get to see how he's very skillful and not in military combat or strategy type format, but in that way that you see the leader in him, and he's a holder of truth, and he's very fearless of leadership and taking responsibility. Now, of course, like I said, you make your mistakes, because he does make some mistakes with Princess Aamina and almost lose her interest, right? But at any rate, you do get to see that as a young boy, as he makes his presence known in the region by being with King Kohane, which is considered to be actually his stepfather. But nonetheless, he's on the scene near Zimbabwe or what have, before he gets his rulership in Kodesh, as when he gets older. So King Daniy'el was taught in the mystery school of thought, a sacred place of knowledge in Egypt for the families of the elite. And by the time, of course, Princess Aamina is on the scene, he has already graduated from there. And so they only get to see each other like later on. And briefly when they were younger, they did get to see each other, because of course he's still around King Kohan. He's still in Zimbabwe. He sometimes go to Pleiadians or what have you, and in the area that we call Kodesh as well, and different parts in the Sudan, the west and the east. So they don't meet up for decades later, and when they do, sparks fly, and of course there's a love interest. So King Daniy'el is one of those characters that you do look up to. He's like a hero type person. He have his faults or what have you, growing up, getting rulership early, but a little bit more experience of managing those resources and the status that comes with it, compared to Daniy'el that's all over the place and arrogant to get what he's won and don't really care. But King Daniy'el is the opposite of that. So you get to see him at this young age and become the man that he was born to be, his destiny. All right, so that concludes my character profile on King Daniy'el. I hope you enjoy that, to get some brief on him, and to tune in, as he will make more appearances in this podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today, and please return back next week for my next character profile. If you like this podcast, share it. If you really love it, leave a comment on Spreaker or one of the social platforms like Facebook, and show that you love it. Thank you.